Lord Christopher Monckton, former science advisor to Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, expert on this issue. They're frightened to take you on, generally. Al Gore, will he debate you?
He won't. We advertised right across America for months in all the major newspapers saying, come on, Al, baby, I'm waiting. And he would not even give us an answer. He was terrified. Of course, his speaker's contract specifies not only his usual $300,000 fee.
Good
and you're not even paying me half of that.
No, not even. But you do get some coffee.
But yeah, we get some coffee. But $300,000. On top of that, he will not take any unscripted question. He will not be interviewed by anyone from the media unless his staff have cleared them first. And the only ones they clear are so dumb and sycophantic that they will only ask questions that he can answer, which isn't very many of them, like, what's your name? Anything beyond that, and he's foxed. So, of course, he won't debate with me.
This is very important for people to hear, because in Canada we have David Suzuki, who is the Canadian...
He won't debate with me either, incidentally.
Really?
No, because you may know Roy Green, who's one of your colleagues. He does radio right across coast to coast. Yeah. I suppose he's the doyen of the conversational hosts on the radio in Canada. He rang me up one day and he said, look, would you like to go head-to-head with anyone I can find to put up against you? I said, sure. He said, most people at this point start laying down preconditions. I said, no, I don't mind. You know, this is a matter which is a perfectly straightforward scientific and economic matter. I've boned up on it. I know most of the main points. I'm very happy to debate with absolutely anyone. So he tried David Suzuki. And David Suzuki said, yes, of course I'll debate. And then he was told it was going to be me. And he said, oh, no, I'm not going to debate. But I tell you what, I will send one of my PR guys to debate. And he did. And if you can get a tape of that show, you would just love it.
Yeah, I see this. We'll get on to the major issue in just a few moments, but I see this in the issue of atheism as well. Dawkins and people like this.
Yes.
They choose who they will debate, and there are some people they know are very good, very strong, non-emotional.
Yes.
And they want no, not him,
yes.
because they know they will win.
I think that's absolutely right. There's no doubt that what one might call, as a package deal, the left. And I use it in a very wide sense. You know, the climate left, the anti-religious left. There's all different categories of, and I'll just call them left for the sake of shorthand. Yeah. They have learnt that the way to work things is to become a personality, as Dawkins has and Gore has. And then when you've become a celeb, and a TV show rings up and says, will you debate with, say, Monckton, who isn't really a celeb, though thank you for helping to do your little bit towards that worthy aim, then they tend to say, well, no, we won't debate with him. And so they will only, therefore, go on if they're not challenged by anyone. And they can go on repeating the same mantra. And it was actually Goebbels who worked out this technique. Never, ever, ever appear with somebody who knows the subject.
They'll be terribly offended to mention a Nazi leader in the same context, the same breath as Al Gore or David Suzuki.
Oh, no, let me explain. I'm not saying that they are like Goebbels. I'm saying the technique they used was devised by Goebbels originally. I'm in no way comparing them with Nazis. I would say, however, that it is a very important principle that on issues of public policy there should be free speech and open debate. And one of the most lamentable features of this debate is the unwillingness of what I call the bedwetters, the true believers in the new superstition that is global warming, and which replaces religion for those who've never really had it. Now at last they've got something they can believe in and get passionate about in the absence of religion. They are very reluctant to debate because one is, as it were, challenging what is not based on reason. It is purely a faith, but it doesn't happen to be a decent religious faith. It's just dopey, but they're terrified of meeting somebody who knows the science, knows the economics, and can say, sorry, but the emperor really has no clothes. It doesn't matter how many scientists or bureaucrats or politicians you line up, and they swear blind because it's profitable or congenial or expedient, or it speaks to a political faction with which they align themselves that this is true. In the end, truth alone is worthy of our entire devotion, and the global warming scare, fundamentally, is not true.
Now that's sort of context here. Economic policy, foreign policy, educational policy, transport policy, all of these now are to a certain degree being defined, even dictated by a belief that man-made global warming is the major issue.
Yes.
The world will end, climate change will destroy us all unless we do embrace what Gore and Suzuki and the rest say.
Yes.
And that every scientist worth the name believes in it and agrees with them. Not true?
Not true at all. Indeed, Mark Morano, who used to advise Senator Inhofe, who's one of the many senators in the US Congress who doesn't believe in any of this nonsense, has compiled a list of 700 plus scientists and researchers who have been publicly reported as dissenting from what is said to be this unanimous consensus. And in fact, the dissent is much wider than that. If I take just a single element in this debate, was it or was it not warmer in the Middle Ages worldwide than it is today? On that question, 700 scientists from more than 400 institutions in more than 40 countries in the last 20 years have contributed to papers that I know about and can on notice list, saying that the medieval warm period, which is well known in history and archaeology, as it is in climate science, was real, was global, and was noticeably warmer than the present, so that there's nothing special about today's temperatures. That, if you like, is the consensus on the medieval warm period. That's just one area of the science that I've just picked out to illustrate that on that one subject, the supposed official view, which is that they've abolished the medieval warm period, is not the consensus. There's a handful of scientists only who have contributed to papers, all of them based on bogus computer models, which has been the devil in this debate, saying that the medieval warm period wasn't real. All of them were relatives and friends and co-authors of the people who wrote the original paper trying to pretend there wasn't a medieval warm period. And so, if you like, the scientific community has become, at least in part, corrupted by the desire to get alongside the sources of funding. And these days, 99% of all science is funded by you and me, the taxpayer, via governments. And therefore, if you want these days to investigate the strange habits of the lesser spotted talk show host, let us say, as a category, and I apply for a grant, from an anthropology department to put you under a microscope and have a really good look at what makes you tick, I won't get the grant unless I add the magic voodoo words in the context of global warming. Mm-hmm. And then immediately they'll be throwing millions, if not even billions, at me to do this. So there's an enormous funding bias in science caused by the fact that science is what we economists call a monopsony. There's only one paying customer, and that's the taxpayer via governments. And that colours science in numerous rather depressing ways, not least on the global warming issue, where governments have now largely decided that for reasons of their own political expediency and convenience and profit, they should seize upon this and go around saying global warming is the big issue, because it suddenly makes politicians feel important, because at last there's something they can really get their teeth into, and they can save us from ourselves by savage increases in taxation, wholesale closing down of industries they disapprove of, and also, of course, mindless regulation of what kind of car you can drive, what kind of fuel you can use, how often you can turn your lights on, and even in the UK and Europe, ludicrously now, what kind of light bulbs you can have. And they've told us we have to have a light bulb which, if you drop it, costs $3,000 and a specialist team to come out and clean it up because it's full of poisonous mercury gas, which can kill you if you breathe it in. And this is now the mandatory replacement for all the incandescent bulbs, which you can actually read by, whereas these ghastly fluorescent mercury things, they put out a light which is extremely uncomfortable on the eyes, and it's going to cause an even greater dumbing down of the population than has happened already. They won't be able to read at all.
So, children in North America, children in Canada are taught now. They actually will come home and tell mummy and daddy what they're supposed to believe. And there have even been some extreme cases of denouncing parents who won't turn their lights off at the right time.
Oh, yes, we're straight back into communist territory.
That's it. So we're told that unless we change radically, the climate will change to such a degree the North will disappear, there'll be mass melting, we won't be able to feed ourselves, and the world eventually will end. Hollywood movies are made to back it up culturally, talk show hosts and so on will echo this. And to dissent from this, and I find this terribly sinister, you become a denier. And the only time that really has been used has been to describe Holocaust deniers who are either mad or evil. So if you question it, you are just like a Nazi.
And so if I were to say that Al Gore et hoc genus omne were Nazis for refusing to debate and allow free speech. That would be unforgivable. But they can call us Nazis by calling us deniers, and everybody merely parrots it and repeats it. So once again, we see an extraordinary double standard in the media, by which if I were to use any such language, they would say, "Oh, it makes you shiver, it's so extreme." But if they say it, oh, well, that's a fair comment. So it is definitely very, very biased. But in the end, there's a very, very old philosophical principle at stake here. And that is that the truth is the truth is the truth, however many lies are told, however many people tell the lies, and however important the people who tell the lies conceive themselves to be. And the truth is, and we now know this is the truth, that global warming isn't a problem. And let me now turn the